Mystic Tom here. Today we're going to talk about werewolves and shapeshifters, monsters, things like that. True stories involved, some true stories involved that we're going to talk about. But first off, let's separate fact from fiction. I was watching a movie just the other night. It's called Ginger Snaps. It's an older movie from several years back. It was real popular at one time. I don't hear anybody talk about it anymore, but I watched it again, and it really holds up really well. It's about a girl who is bitten by a werewolf, and she starts to turn after that. But it's a gradual turn. It has nothing to do with the full moon. Just after a while, she starts to turn into a she-wolf type creature. But what strikes me about all that is that most of the movies that you always see, it seems like it's always involuntary. A man or a woman is bitten by a werewolf or some such, and then they have the curse of lycanthropy, and it's a curse. And there's nothing they can really do to stop it other than be killed in some manner. They're kind of like a victim themselves. But in reality, if you study folklore, if you study history, if you read a lot, you look into it, a lot of the accounts that are deemed to be true, you will find out that most cases of shape-shifting were voluntary cases. Specifically, North America, there have been all kinds of reports of, within recent years, within the last 20 years at least, maybe going back a little bit farther than that, there have been some reports of werewolf-like creatures, dogmen. There's the Michigan dogman, I believe. I've not really read a whole lot about that yet, specifically, and the Wisconsin werewolf, the Bray Road Beast, which is that's the Great Lakes area. There's a lot of reports of that, and there is this book, a series of books by Linda S. Godfrey. I'm reading this one right now called Monsters Among Us. I've just started on that one, but I've read a lot about the Bray Road Beast. She wrote a book called Hunting the American Werewolf. So all these accounts, there's tons and tons of accounts of creatures. In some cases they're Bigfoot-like, and in some cases they're more wolf-like. Okay. Now, as it turns out, the consensus is in a lot of these cryptozoology, monsters, researchers, the people that look into these type of things, usually the consensus is that they are paraphysical, maybe entities that are interdimensional, that type of thing, and that seems to be a common theory. It's a good theory because it's one way to explain why they disappear so quickly. There is a flap of sightings of some kind of creature. Everybody sees it. It ends up in the news. Researchers come in, reporters, and then the creature disappears. Maybe some evidence is left behind, tracks or some hairs that are turned out to be undetermined origin or whatever, and they just vanish. And so that brings forth the interdimensional theory. But one thing that nobody really looks into much, and I'm gonna bring this up and see what you think. I don't want to formulate any theory for sure, but you look at things and it makes you wonder. I do know that shape-shifting, specifically werewolves, or men and women that can become animals, is very, very closely associated with warlockery, sorcery, and the occult. The appearance of either like upright walking werewolf type entities or gigantic wolf type creatures, you know, I personally have never seen anything like that. One thing that I can guarantee you absolutely for sure is that people, ordinary people, do report these things. That this does happen. It's not just something that somebody's, you know, made up and done a book or a documentary about. True story. I have been looking into the occult, the supernormal, cryptozoology. I had contacts with the local sheriff's department a few years back. I had some deputies, they looked into some, when cops, a lot of times they're out at night, you know, on third shift, and they see all kinds of weird stuff. The supernatural is often among that type of thing. UFOs, they see all kinds of weird stuff. So they would let me know. They would give me a call, or actually come and get me in this case. Come to my house and get me, or stop me when something would happen in the area. And it did. There was a case, there was a flap of sightings going on of basically an upright walking hairy thing that had a big snout, just that came out like to here, that people were seeing in the area. I mean, it was reported a lot. It was no hoax. It was going on, and it was, a lot of people were creeped out by it. People were getting on the internet and talking about it where I live, and I was like, well, you know, whatever. Well, the deputy came and got me one night after a 911 call, and I listened to the recording of the call, and the guy was freaked out, obviously. It was a resident of the area, lived out in the boonies, as usual. And he said whatever it was he had seen, he shot at it with a shotgun. Took a shot at it. It was hairy. It wasn't real big, but he insisted it wasn't a bear, and that it had sort of like a human-like face in this case. But it walked upright and on all fours. It had the ability to do that. So we went out there, we talked to the guy, I interviewed him very closely. He was obviously scared. He had seen something. It really freaked him out. The deputy went back and he got a flashlight, and he had night vision binoculars. We went in search of it. We didn't see anything, but we did collect a sample of some saliva, and there was a big leaf there with saliva all over it, more than I think a human could produce. He collected that. We went back the next day and we found the shotgun shells of the guy, so he did shoot at something. You know, something did happen there, because he was hysterical. We went back and we found some feces, which looked a little bit like horse, but it was an enclosed area. There weren't any horses around. He had that, and the saliva analyzed. The deputy sent it off to forensics. According to him, it came back as undetermined. It wasn't horse, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't deer, it wasn't ape, it wasn't human, it wasn't any of that. They matched up against a battery of things, and it didn't turn out to be anything. But that was pretty much the last that I ever heard of that. But we did look into it.